And I know that your 80th birthday is upcoming. Yeah.
80,
Praise,
yes.
praise
And that's
God
me.
for
We're
that.
not talking about my mother or my grandmother, which I can't quite understand.
Right. So in a minute or two, tell us what's the most important thing in life. You know?
Well, I guess my relationship with Christ.
It's the
I mean,
most
he
important.
has been the one consistent thing
Mm.
throughout life, the one consistent person. My dad was killed when I was 2. And my mother's mantra all through my growing up years was, your daddy is dead, but you have a father in heaven that loved you more than your daddy ever could. So therefore, I very early learned that God's love was unconditional and was consistent and unfailing. And that's just never been a problem for me. And as I watch some of my friends struggle, I always thank God for my mother and her consistent.
Wonderful.
And that's still true today.
Well, Bonnie, I'm joining this call partly because I wanted to record my gratitude for you and who you are, but also the way that you have encouraged so many of us in NCF. I know before me, Mary Bowes was the staff worker, and you continue to support her in so many ways, even now today. And during my years as a staff worker with nursing students, I know you were always very encouraging and both financially and prayerfully supportive. And I know even today you still pray for me, and that's incredibly powerful and so wonderful to have that support. And then through your mentoring of many nursing students, Belinda came along, Belinda Hartley, and she was the staff worker after me. And it was because of your mentoring of her as a student that she then became the staff worker. So your life, Bonnie, has been very, very fruitful. I know there are so many nurses today who were students of yours at Ryerson who are still following Jesus to this day, and you keep track of so many of them, not only in Toronto, but around Canada, around the world. And we probably couldn't even count the number of nurses who would accredit their faith and their trust in God because of your support of them. And not only Nurses Christian Fellowship, but also InterVarsity. I know that Jessica Zile was the staff worker at Ryerson, and then Archie Balakumaran that you mentored and supported. And these women too speak so highly of you. So that's part of the reason I came on this call, was to say, thank God for you, Bonnie Hartley.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. The women, some of the women that I mentioned earlier were so phenomenal in my life that to be able to hear that I was able to do some of that for others really means a lot. I mean, some of those women were just, and the older I get, the more I think about coming to work at 6 o'clock. I think, wow.
Yes. Do you have any questions for Bonnie, Ruth?
Bonnie, I'd love to hear from you. What sustained you those years of being professor at Ryerson? And lots of discouragements, lots of times your body didn't feel strong or well, but you kept showing up. And yeah, talk about what sustained you in your professional life.
I don't know if you realize, but I was commissioned by my church. I think it was Don Festursky that was there that day, and my minister, and we had a full service of commissioning as a Christian teacher. And I often thought of that when I cleaned the fridge. That became one of my jobs. But that was through an InterVarsity workshop. Remember, they used to have them right at Christmas. This wasn't in Urbana, this was a local thing. And I know John Stott was the speaker, and he introduced me to the concept of Christian, secular service is full-time Christian service. And then I got this fabulous book by somebody, I think by Peabody, and it was the same thing, secular work is full-time service. Mm-hmm. And I began to feel very, very strong calling of Christ to work in Ryerson as faculty, to be a missionary. And that was something I thought about quite often. And I still get very upset when I hit Christian circles in which the paid staff are real missionaries and other people are secondary.
You were a true missionary, Bonnie. That's
I don't believe that. But I mean, John Stott, nothing like having the best as an inspiration. Right. I guess the other person I'd like to talk about as made a life-changing for me was Dr. Paul Brand. NCF used to have camps in the States, 10-day camps at Camp Burton and Cedar Rapids, I think was the other one. Anyway, Dr. Paul Brand was the speaker at Burton one year, and his theme was Micah 6 and 8. And for some reason, social ministry had never hit me before that. Like it just, I don't know, I wasn't aware of social gospel. And through him, through serving the poor, or whatever you would call that, I found a real difference in my life. So, the whole camp was fabulous. And one of my friends from the camp just died 2 Christmases ago. I don't know, did you know Helen Halstead? She was a prof at University of Kentucky.
No, I don't think so.
And Helen and I wrote quite frequently, emailed type of thing. But certainly those camps were fabulous in terms of, my life and my walk with God and what was important and that kind of thing. So,
mm-hmm.
And of course, we shouldn't forget all the meetings at my place, because the Ontario Committee always met at my place for years and years. And that was one reason I had to buy a dishwasher.
And you fed us so wonderfully. You fed us well. But you were a true missionary. It's true. There was no separation between secular and sacred. You were following Christ in your profession. And nurses are hands of Jesus, that's for sure.
I introduced the NCF committee to Indian food. I do recall that. Educated them. So.
Could you tell us a bit about your life in India? That was before the nursing in Toronto, but that was also a very significant part of your life.
Oh yeah, I had been working in pediatrics at Kingston General as, first of all, a junior teacher and then as a full-fledged teacher. And I began to feel that God was calling me to India. Now, at that point, missionaries were not getting visas to India, period. So I had 2 sets of close friends who were out with CUSO, Canadian University Services Overseas. So they were both, one was in Sarawak, Malaysia, the other one was in Jamaica. They were both pushing. So I applied and I said to God, okay, I think you want me to go to India, but I'm not telling CUSO. And I didn't. However, I ended up in India, and because I was religious, they asked if I would mind going to a mission station. So I spent 2 years working for the American Methodists in northern India, teaching in a pediatric ward, which was what I knew best because that's all I had done. And after 6 months, I went off to a QSO conference. QSO took us back someplace every 6 months to fill us full of gamma globulin, because at that point there were no active inoculations, vaccines against hepatitis. So gamma globulin was the only thing they could offer. So we would get, 6 cc's of gamma globulin every 6 months. When I came back, I discovered I was the acting associate nursing superintendent. This was a 350 bed hospital. I can remember saying, I've never done anything like this, Well, you have your degree, it's in your degree. I said, yes, it is in my degree, but I've never done anything. Anyway, that's what I was. And one of my jobs was to do staffing. And in India, there was a rule that the first Monday of every month, all the staff in the hospital changed wards, except the head nurse. So the first week of every month was sheer chaos in every ward because nobody knew anybody. So I gradually was able to change that to, yes, you'll still rotate, but we'll rotate staggered. However, I would like to bet the day I walked out of there, they went back to their old ways. Anyway, I tried. But I was also still teaching, so I would have parties for the students. And I would write home to my mother, and her mission circle group would produce the money so I could buy refreshments, and we would have parties for the students. So I also was able to do chapel talks. It was a mission hospital, so there was chapel every morning for the students. QSO never asked. I never told them. So it gave me a lot of confidence. I also learned that God does go with you wherever you go. And I'm sure in Papua, you learned that too, Ruth. My roommate and I are still good friends. She's now in the States. Well, she was an American, so she's now in the States. So I don't know what I did for India, but India did a lot for me. I had great plans, but then COVID came along.
Okay. And how did the COVID impact your life?
In terms of the building, a couple of years, just before COVID, the winter before COVID, through a community agency, we began an exercise program in the building to prevent falls among seniors. And when we were gathering for that group, people talked about how lonely they were and how difficult it was because they were alone in the wintertime. And I thought, next year, I'm going to have a tea party. And I'll ask for the library and we'll have a tea party. But of course, we've never done it because the library's been closed for 2 years. No chairs or anything, but as I say, the best laid plans of mice and men. So
it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. It may happen next year. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
We'll be hopeful.
Let's hope the pandemic will end in 3 years' time.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah,
And
I'm getting
Bonnie,
tired of being alone.
I know,
Sorry,
Bonnie, you have been an encouragement to many international students. I think you have hosted them. You've had international Christmas dinners with a number of people, and you've had some housemates over the years. Do you want to say a bit about that?
Nurses Christian Fellowship used to have retreats. One of our guest speakers was a woman called Fee Reeds. Fee worked for OMF International, and she was a teacher in Sapporo, Japan. And Fee had been a nurse before she became an English university teacher. Anyway, once I met her, she was our theme speaker for the weekend, or guest speaker, whatever she was called, for the weekend. So once I met her, I began corresponding with her and I supported her, prayed for her. And when she came home, she became seconded to IBCF, to international student work. And so we got talking, and I would have a group of her students in for dinner once a month for Canadian food. So it was always a great fun, because we had a lot of time discussing what that might be. What was a spice? And I was always getting up from the table and going and saying, this is what we're talking about. And then they'd have this discussion. And Fee had enough Japanese, and usually there was somebody else that would have a little bit more English, and they would discover that, oh, gravy is, what did they call gravy? Meat something or other, something really strange. But anyway, yeah. And then through Fee, I've had a lot of international students staying here for varying periods of time. And some of them I'm still in touch with. Like Yen, I don't know if any of you know Yen Trill, but Yen she is Chinese Vietnamese. Her whole aim in life was to go to university. Because she was Chinese, third generation Chinese, lived in Vietnam all her life, she could not go to university because this was under the Viet Cong, and they were just nobody. So she left as a refugee and ended up in a refugee camp where she met Christ. She then ended up at the University of Waterloo and has a degree in computer science. And Yen and I are still friends. We gab on the phone. And when I could have people in for Christmas, she always comes here for Christmas, stuff like that. So no, they've really enriched my life. I've been so blessed in so many ways.
And you have
Funny,
been
I was
blessed.
just talking to one of my previous students from Sick Kids. You know how long that goes by. It's the last person I talked to before. And I am so fortunate, just so blessed.
I know it's very different right now.
Yeah. I guess no matter how difficult it is, they have got to establish quiet time. And I don't care if you're a nurse, a doctor, an engineer, or what you are. That seems to be, from what I can see, the only way to continually grow in Christ is to honestly look to his word and then seek out other Christian nurses for reinforcement, for encouragement. I mean, I think my close friends are still Christian nurses.
And what would you like to see happen in NCF Canada today?
I guess more groups to encourage. And even if the groups have to be on Zoom, that knowing other people are going through the same thing, I think is really important. And that they can pray for each other and encourage each other. Yeah, you know, I had the same problem, what we decided to do, and, you know, that kind of stuff that is so important. And it's funny, I just had this conversation with somebody who didn't realize NCF still existed. And I said, oh yes, it's become much more of a graduate program than it's with students, because they're now being incorporated into NCF, into IBCF groups. But it's very much alive and well. So, and I had to smile at the intercessor a couple of months ago, and I was going to phone you about this and didn't, about this work-related groups. Aha, they've seen what we've done for years. We got something.
That's right. James Alloway, he's in British Columbia, and he's helping to move it forward. And I've told him too, Nurses Christian Fellowship had the vision.
And remember, maybe you're too young, Ruth, there used to even be Teachers Christian Fellowship.
I do remember, that's right.
Yeah. So nursing, we need a lot of encouragement.
Mhm.
And NCF was one place that you could get it.
Mhm.
No, NCF has certainly been the most important organization in my life for Christian growth,
Mm.
from, all different things. And probably if I sat and thought more, I could even think of some more things, but it's just been, as I say, always been part of my life.
Mm.
Well, not always, not as a child, of course, but once I became a student nurse. One funny thing, this is not NCF. A couple of years ago, the husband of one of my close friends died. And a few months later, she phoned me and she said, "You're never going to guess what I found." I said, "No." So she said, "I was cleaning out some of Bill's papers, and there was a list of the intervarsity group at Queen's from 1959. And guess whose name was on it?" So I went to Queen's before I went in nursing. I had a sandwich degree, a year of university, 3 years of nursing, and back to university. So
Wow.
my roots go a long way back.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, Bonnie, you've influenced so many people, and thank you again for your influence in my life and your prayers and support. And thank you, Veronica, for organizing this conversation. I hope many people will be blessed by hearing your story, Bonnie.
I hope so.
It is a privilege to have you today. And this is my first project, how to get the recorded Zoom into sections that we can encourage other people. And may God's name be honored and glorified through your work. Mm.
And the thing I have learned is you don't retire.
What is your favorite hymn or Bible
I
verse?
have 2 intervarsity hymns that will be sung at
Oh.
my funeral.
Oh.
To God be the glory,
Mm.
and oh, the deep, deep love of Jesus.
Ah.
And I love those 2.
Mm. And favorite
one of-
Bible verse?
What can separate us from the love of God?
Mm.
Nothing. That
Thank you.
also will be used at my funeral.
Thank you, Bonnie.